Running the party right now is Vinny Perth. Vinny, good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Morning, how are you doing, man?
Let's start with Rafa Benitez. Rafa issued a lengthy enough statement saying he was really kind of unaware of just how bad the situation was at the club, how difficult it would be for him to overcome. And then obviously you have COVID, you've got injuries. Have you any sympathy for Rafa in this scenario, or did he actually kind of make the situation worse with some of his decisions along the way? What's your take on the Benitez era?
I think it's a mixture of all that stuff. There's no doubt Everton, similar to Leeds, had a really bad injury early on in the season. Only started the season, first couple of games really well, but huge amount of injuries. Richarlison was out of late, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who was a big way of how they play, was a huge loss for them. Centre half. Yermina was out injured as well. They've had a couple of bad injuries, and so the luck hasn't gone your way. But that's often the way when you lose your job. Managers look for excuses, and some of them are real excuses. But ultimately, I think the decision to appoint Rafa Benitez was a strange one. There's no doubt he's a an outstanding manager, but and even in all the money and all the stuff that washes around football, there is still a thing around culture, around what fans mean to clubs, and especially a club like Everton. The fans just never took to him, and I don't think they were ever going to take to him. I think it was a massive risk by the board, and it's one that ultimately hasn't paid off. And there were a lot of anger from the fans now towards the board as a result of this. So they've shot themselves in the foot as a club, big time. And it's a long way back for them to repair the damage of the last couple of years, because they spent a huge amount of money, close to $500 million. And it's a long way back for what is a big club in English football terms. I was lucky enough to grow up in the 80s. Remember people like when they won the league title, and you go back to them, Adrian Heath and Graham Sharp and Kevin Sheedy. They were a big club, and it's a long way back for them to rebuild from where they are.
Yeah, they went toe-to-toe with the great Liverpool team of the 80s and actually beat them in a league and pushed them to really high heights, won a Cup Winners' Cup when that trophy still existed. And it never felt like the current ownership had a vision about how to get back there. It always feels like they'll make a decision on the current manager and then that'll go wrong, and they'll make a decision on another manager who doesn't really seem to be part of the same plan. Like, I don't know what the Everton culture is. I don't know what their identity is, what their plan is, how they want to play.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, cultures come and go. I mean, I heard Roy Keane bring up culture yesterday, and sometimes it's a lazy word, but it does mean a lot to people in football. But cultures in terms of your club can change. I mean, we always heard about the West Ham way of playing for years and years. Yeah, how long ago was it that West Ham were this great footballing team? Back to maybe 60s, 70s. But they don't have to look too far to a club like West Ham. How, funny enough, it's come full circle. Someone like David Moyes has put a new culture back into that club. And West Ham were very much like Everton for a long period of time over the last number of years. But you can see young players coming through at West Ham. You can see a togetherness around the club, around the team. And it takes a manager and ultimately a club and a director of football, all of them things that, it take a long time to explain. But even another club like Brighton have done it. And Everton must be envious of clubs like West Ham and Brighton, who seem to have the whole club on the right pathway, on the same page, everyone singing off the same hymn sheet. And it doesn't take a huge amount of work, ironically, with the money they have to fix it. It just takes time. And the good thing on Everton's side is that I think they've got a set of fans or a set of people that follow them that will give them that time if they can see progress. And if they appoint a manager over a 3 or 4 year period, I think they'll get the backing to make those changes within the club. So it can be done. And as I said, don't have to look too far away for examples of how it was done. West Ham and Brighton are two that spring to mind, where just getting the culture, the structure in the club right, all the way from the top to the bottom. And because I know a lot about under 23 football, for argument's sake. They've a hell of an under 23 setup, They're generally one of the best under 23s in the Premier League too. And so they have got certain parts of the club right. It's just when you chop and change managers so often and you get different. Rafa's obviously the voice of character. We can see that with the way Dina left the club to Villa last week. And it's not what they need at the moment. They need somebody that's really calm and sound and takes a long-term view of the club.
And it might well be Roberto Martínez that they bring in to the role. So say, Vinny, if we have Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola, and I'm not sure who else you'd have there, in the top rung of managers in the world, how many rungs below that is Roberto Martínez, in your view?
Yeah, it's hard to know because he manages one of the great sides of Belgium in terms of the star quality they have, but ultimately haven't won a trophy. I was listening to Sky Sports last night, and one of the former players at Everton was quite critical, but I put that down to he sort of left around that time. His time at Everton was mixed. He started very well, and ultimately he lost his job, and things went downhill from there. I think he took over from David Moyes. So it is a difficult one to say. Martínez is the type of guy, a bit like a Brendan Rodgers, where he'll get into the club and he'll help fix the whole club from top to bottom, and he'll be very thoughtful, and he'll leave no stone unturned. I think that's what they need now. There will be calls for other people. I've seen the likes of Graham Potter mentioned, why would he leave a club like Brighton and the security of it to Everton would make no sense. But Martínez looks like a real safe pair of hands that can take a long-term view. But just how good he is, I don't know, because you have to question why. And you're talking about final moments at European Championships and World Cups at the highest level. I accept that. But that Belgium side haven't really looked like winning a tournament, and with the quality he has had over the last number of years, that would leave a little question mark on him. But if they appointed him, I would say that was an excellent appointment.
I would feel a little bit. I'd feel sorry to interrupt, Vinny, but for me, the decision from Martínez to take the Everton gig would be, for me, a bit of a black mark, because it's like this Belgium side has a really realistic chance of winning a World Cup, and if he wins a World Cup, I'm not saying he'll get any job after that, but there's a chance he might get one of the super club jobs. Certainly, maybe in Italy, maybe in Spain. You know, like who knows who the next Atletico manager is going to be when the Simeone era eventually ends. Like those gigs are all potential for him. But if he comes into Everton, it's such a shit show. Like there's no guarantee.
Yeah, and Jerry, just on that, he was very close to getting the Real Madrid job, believe it or not, a couple of years ago. So he is obviously held in that high regard. So it is one of them where I accept that. The only counter argument to that is, I don't know the exact figures, but check the salary of the Belgium head coach as opposed to the salary of the Everton coach. I would say it's probably a 5, 6, 7-fold increase in his wages. So there is that to look at. I'm not saying that's the right decision, but I agree with you. I'd love, if I was a coach, I'd love a chance to win a World Cup European Championship with this Belgium side. And I think if he'd done it, I think he's young enough for that to open up a huge amount of opportunities for him. But sometimes the boat is there, and if you don't jump on, it passes you by and you don't get another opportunity. And that's why managers sometimes make bad decisions and take the wrong choice in the next club.
It seems like a pretty obvious point to make, Vinny, but why would Martínez be a good appointment if he was already sacked by the club?
Yeah, I have a bit of history of that myself. Why? Because in fairness, he's not somebody who, you know, he's not divisive character. You wouldn't feel that he's fell out with a lot of people at Everton. He's got a way of playing that, you know, you feel that Everton would like that type of style of play, you know, of the history of the club. Plays more or less a 3-4-2-1, similar to what Chelsea do. He does that at Belgium. He's got a hell of a lot of good players to do that with. He's still a young, they would consider him innovative type of coach. So we don't know what went on when he lost his job. There's new owners there, a lot more money. he did take over David Moyes that was very strong. But at the same time, someone like him, you could see, is a steady pair of hands. And as I say, Everton just need to rebuild over a 2, 3, 4 year period. And they went and chased the top 4 a couple of years ago and spent a lot of money. But the gap now is even bigger than it ever was. So they probably need somebody like that with a safe pair of hands, good way of playing football, not a divisive character, just come away from the headlines a little bit. But remember, they did attract someone like Carlo Ancelotti not that long ago. So
it's a fair point. Maybe he's looking at that and saying Ancelotti used it as a way to get the Real Madrid gig, and maybe he sees it something similar. I want to move on to the Man City Chelsea game.
Yeah.
Where's Tuchel at the moment? What's going on with him? Why has he not been able to get the best performances from Chelsea, particularly over the last couple of months?
Yeah, it was interesting. This was fascinating for me the other day because he started Lukaku, and that's fine. I mean, Lukaku, big money signing. They spent what was 100 million on him, but I think he's in danger of becoming another sort of statistic at Man City, which seems strange. He's only in the job 12 months, or at Chelsea, because they do like to chop and change their manager, and it has worked at different stages. When he first came in, and for me, he's one of the best in the world. He's been a breath of fresh air. But he had the sort of the beating of Man City team. If you remember Champions League final, he started Timo Werner up front. The FA Cup semi-final, he completely outplayed City. If City are vulnerable in any way, for me, it's on the counter-attack. I think you can get both their centre-halves with pace. But Lukaku gave them nothing the other day, and it was a strange team he selected. He's left out Mason Mount as well, who creates a lot for them. So as much as this is madness, the history of Chelsea tells you his form over the last 10, 11 games has been so bad that you wouldn't be shocked, or it wouldn't be massive. Well, it would be massive news, but it wouldn't be a big shock if Chelsea made a change over the next 4-6 weeks if results didn't improve. The way they've fallen from the top down, the only advantage he has is they're going to stay as a Champions League team. When Frank Lampard lost his job, I think they were 8th or 9th. So that's the difference. But his form has been so bad that it's sort of questioned whether Chelsea will stay, because they are that team that likes to chop and change managers, and it's worked for them. In all fairness, they got rid of Lampard, and Tuchel goes and wins the Champions League. But the way the signing of Lukaku has left a lot of questions for me in terms of the style of play. Last year it was brilliant. Timo Werner, people questioned him. He's not a brilliant finisher, I get that, but the way they played the other day was alarming, and hopefully from their point of view it's only a one-off.
I hear Rafa Benitez is looking for a job at the moment, so if Tuchel does get the sack, there's someone there. Like on Lukaku, it is fascinating because the manager has to take some blame for this signing, I suspect, considering Tuchel, I'd imagine, was at least asked about, do you want Lukaku? Maybe not. Maybe Chelsea is such a weird situation, but it does seem that the way Tuchel wants to play, Vinny, is it's not conducive to Lukaku's strengths. Is that fair enough, or is that absolving Lukaku of poor form?
One or two things. One is I think Tuchel had a bit of a go on after the match. If you remember, he sort of rolled John Stones early in the game, ended up a 3v2 situation, and he just picked out the wrong pass to Pulisic, but he should have done better in that situation. But there was 2 instances where Pulisic should have put him through, but Chelsea didn't play to his strengths, and his strength is ball into feet. He's actually quite quick in behind, but they didn't give him a lot of good service. There was opportunities to give him service, and Chelsea went away from how they beat City a couple of times 6 months ago, and that was the big thing for me. If you're going to play Lukaku, then maybe Mason Mount, because of how good he is in terms of picking out a pass, would really help them. But I just felt City just bossed them. They put them under pressure, and they didn't have that pace in behind. As I said, where City vulnerable, if anywhere, they're that good, is the two centre halves can sometimes be isolated, and I don't think it played up to Lukaku's strengths. And if you look at the game, I think he touched the ball something like 22 times in the whole game. So, if he's not going to give you a real threat in behind, what is he giving you? And what ultimately happened is, because of City's false nine, the position that Foden played and the movement of Kevin De Bruyne, it meant that Kante, Kovacic, Pulisic, Ziyech were sort of defensive midfielders, the four of them running different places. And Chelsea never got a platform. And I think Tuchel has blamed, Lukaku for not holding the ball up, which he didn't do well. But some of the link-up play was poor, and it's the first time I would say Tuchel has made a real mistake for me since he's come into the club, and he's paid a heavy price for it, because I think that defeat rules them out of the title race completely now.
Is there a legitimate argument to be made about the cultural differences in English football compared to, say, Italian football? Because you talk about using Lukaku as a focal point. That didn't work at Manchester United either, and it was a very different Lukaku that we saw in Italy, not because necessarily of the style of the league, but because I guess the style of Conte and having Martínez beside him, and also being the spearhead of the attack, not holding up the ball, actually getting on the end of attacks and scoring goals. Like, it does seem that like those differences are quite stark. So it begs the question: A, why Chelsea signed him, but B, why Manchester United played in such a way with Lukaku in their team, and why Chelsea are playing in such a way with Lukaku in their team at the moment.
Yeah, and probably the answer isn't, I don't think, is as blunt as Italian football against English football. I think it's the stylistic. It's about the manager. But again, going back to that word, whether it's the right word, culture in your club and how you want to play. I mean, when you over the last 12 months, you probably think, what did United need? They probably needed a Lukaku type for Rashford and Greenwood to play off at different stages, but they were never going to sign him back. They just let him go. His form for Inter Milan was sensational. There's no doubt about it, and for Belgium. So you can understand, with all the money Chelsea have to burn, why they went after somebody. Timo Werner wasn't necessarily working out for them. Probably felt he needed goals in that team. So it makes sense. It is a difficult one to answer, because there's no doubt the Premiership now is as good as it's ever been. It's the best league in the world. But it's a league that's built on speed and power. I would say most centre-halves are really, really quick. Most midfielders, fullbacks are really, really quick all the way down the league, by and large, to some exceptions to it. So, I think you have to beat teams in a different way. It's not just about that, where I watch a lot of BT show, a good bit of Italian football, and the centre-halves are, I would say, a little bit slower, for want of a better word, and therefore he was able to get in behind maybe a little bit more. But I think it's more stylistic of what your manager wants and the style of which you want to play. I thought he was a good fit for Chelsea, to be fair, but for whatever reason, it's just not working out. I think the loss of Reece James and Chiswell at fullback, I think the two of them are big loss because of the service they would provide for him. And as I said, Mason Mount for me was a big loss for them on Saturday, the game, which didn't help them.
Vinny, we'll leave it there for today. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads. Thank you.
Vinny Perth giving us some thoughts on the big stories from the weekend. Really, Rafa sacked by Everton and Man City beating Chelsea. We'll come back to Man United and Villa and Liverpool and all the rest of that a little bit later on in the week.